welcome to ONYX Pages. It is Injeri. I am here with a 7-carry shell review of Mother of the Sea by Zetta Elliott, and this is a companion video to the author's spotlight on Zetta Elliott, which should be posted around the same time. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the plot. This is the story of a teenage girl who is stolen from her village and who is taken on a ship across the sea, across the Middle Passage, to a place where we expect that she will become enslaved, and it tells a story of what happens to her along the way. Many of the things that happen to her are quite magical, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So talking about the first cowrie shell, the first cowrie shell asks the question, what is the plot like? Is the plot good? Is it consistent? And is it gripping? And I would say 1 cowrie shell for plot, because there's a definite sort of beginning, clear build up, clear crisis point, and all of the subplots that, I mean, it is a novella, so it doesn't get as complex as a novel would, but all of the characters and the tensions that build up throughout the plot do get worked through by the end of it. So it's consistent, it flows really nicely, and I would say 1 full cowrie shell for plot. In terms of world building, again, I would give a full cowrie shell for world building. There are 3 different worlds that make up the universe in Mother of the Sea. The first is Africa, and the second is the sea, and then the third is the landing spot. And of course the sea is the main part of those 3 worlds, and also the ship is the place where most of the action takes place. And I think that Elliott does an excellent job of giving us like atmospheric descriptions of each of those places and what happens in each of those places. I really like the way that she takes in a bit of fantasy and also magical realism into the experience of the ship itself, and I didn't find that jarring a lot at all. I actually found that really engaging and really inviting. So a full cowrie shell for world building. The next cowrie shell has to do with characters. Who are they? Did they convince me? Did I find myself emotionally attached to them? What did I think? I found myself most attached to the girl who is the protagonist, and also to the child. I found myself throughout the novella asking who this child was, where she came from, what her role was, what this big plan was that was enveloping. And I also really found myself loving this girl, this teenager who is going through trauma, who sees the death of family members. She sees death and sexual violence around her, and still is able to find a place of power and triumph, even while she's trying to figure out how to contend with this new set of surroundings. I give a full cowrie shell for characters. One of the things I really liked about this book is that the main characters are all female, and different kinds of females at different ages. So you've got a little girl, you've got a teenager, you also have older women, and then you have this other female entity that is kind of ageless, which I think was amazing. Also, the sea is a character in this novella, and you know that I love my stories about water, and I felt deeply satisfied by this. So a full cowrie shell for characters. The next question is about whether or not there's any LGBT content, or whether heterosexuality or heterosexism is questioned. It's not in this book, so there is no cowrie shell for that. There aren't any characters, even though there was like some, there was some sexual violence, and I mean, there wasn't romance, there was just sexual violence. So I'm not sure if this was the story where that could have been explored, but I do think that there might have been opportunities to, question heterosexuality in it. But in the absence of a romance, might have been challenging. But to answer the question, no, there isn't any LGBTQ content or no specific challenge of heterosexism. Is this story aspirational? Absolutely. There have been a lot of different retellings of what happens in the Middle Passage, and in this particular story, there is this statement, I think, implicit in the whole story, which is that there was strength to be found in surviving the passage and also deciding not to survive the passage. There were a lot of different moments where African peoples, my ancestors, made decisions that were empowering despite the circumstances that they found themselves in. And I found that aspirational. I also found aspirational the fact that there is a direct interface between a force of nature, divinity, and human beings. I found that aspirational as well. Were societal norms challenged? I would say yes. One societal norm that was challenged was the agency that this child had. Now, we learned that this child is more than a child, but this powerful force, you know, comes to us in the form of a child. And for children to be seen as powerful and for children to be seen as forces that can address systemic oppression, I think that that is challenging the norm that children are not powerful. So that's one thing. And the fact that what effectively becomes a rebellion is led by a teenage girl. I have not come across a story where a teenage girl is responsible for starting a rebellion on a ship of enslaved Africans, and I thought that that was really beautiful. And you'll see that in the interviews, Zetta talks a little bit about the role of women on that ship and what it means to have that as an example when we look at and compare it to other stories of what happened along the Middle Passage. And then finally is this Afrofuturist. I would say half a carry shell for this, and the reason is the story in and of itself isn't Afrofuturist. It's not future oriented. It's a story about what happened hundreds of years ago. But I think the act of retelling a passage along a journey along the Middle Passage is a powerful thing to do. And I do think that there's an element of Afrofuturism that is about trying to figure out how our stories have been told and where the retellings have gone wrong, and to retell those stories correctly for the purpose of inspiring people to imagine different futures. So I do think there's an element of Afrofuturism in this story, even though it is backward looking in time. So when we add all of those up, I think we get to 5.5 cowrie shells for Mother of the Sea by Zetta Elliott. I would definitely suggest that you pick up this novella. It's a quick read, it's an engaging read, and I think it'll leave you feeling inspired and interested in exploring more of Zetta Elliott's work. And to you, Zetta, thank you very much for answering the call to write this book. I really enjoyed it. Thank you also to the Rebel Women's Lit Club out of Jamaica for making me aware of this book and allowing me the opportunity to be touched and moved by it. So thanks very much for watching this video. If you've read the book, please discuss in the comment section below, and if you haven't, maybe you should pick it up. Thanks. Bye.